I'm delighted to say that I'm joined right now by Peter Cardwell, talk presenter and, of course, long-time political in-the-know chap. You've been watching PMQs as usual, so we don't have to. We took it live last week. It was actually very lively. Now, local elections tomorrow, last day of campaigning. So obviously you think, you know, that's sort of bread and butter issues on the doorstep in those local council elections would be what the MPs want to ask the Prime Minister about. So what did Kemi Badenoch go on?
Well, there's very little of that. In fact, she talked about grooming gangs. The other big issue...
Is that a big issue for a lot of voters,
well, it is, of course, and it's a big issue in a lot of areas, but certainly, and it's something that should be raised and should be continue to be raised, especially because Jess Phillips said on Monday, essentially, that the Home Office Minister, Jess Phillips, talked about a possible cover-up at some stage. Very interesting.
And she was denying that she could possibly be involved in it.
Yes, of course.
There were questions from Rupert Lowe, the former Reform MP, and others about this.
Right.
And I guess an abject failure to get proper independent inquiry going.
So Kemi Badenoch asked on this in all 6 of her questions. There was a bit in the final question, I haven't clipped it up, but there was a little bit in her final question about the local issues and saying, you know, the Conservative council would mean that these areas would be cleaned up and sorted out, and Keir Starmer said no, Labour would sort it out. But really, the main thrust of all 6 of her questions today were quite surprisingly on grooming gangs. About
dragging, the Prime Minister dragging his heels. Well, let's have a watch and a listen.
It's now 4 months since I asked him for a full national inquiry. Instead, he promised 5 local inquiries. There will be 1 in Oldham. Will he now name where the other 4 inquiries will be?
Why did they not implement a single recommendation in the 14 years they had in office? We're taking forward those. There are recommendations already in place about the change that needs to be taken. They sat on a shelf under the last government. We are acting on them. We are providing for local inquiries, and we're investing more in delivering truth than they ever did.
He cannot name a single place because nothing is happening.
I mean, she's banged to rights on this one, isn't she? And there's no doubt at all that, I mean, a full national inquiry is what the public want, is what a lot of the survivors want. And again, it's an ongoing issue. It's not something from the past, it's ongoing. And you can't have local councils effectively setting up inquiries which aren't, you know, judge-led and having powers to call people in, insist they give evidence, when it's local councils often who are part of the cover-up of these grooming gangs.
Well, they are essentially policing themselves through many of these inquiries.
Worked so well.
Well, it's interesting that Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, wants one, and Harriet Harman, Baroness Harriet Harman, former Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, wants one, and that was brought up in the second clip I'm going to bring you, actually, about Kemi Badenoch. She really hammered this home quite a lot and said this is not essentially a party political issue. To her, anyway, she says this is something that should be done.
Doing the right thing. Well, let's have a watch and listen to this clip.
Andy Burnham wants a national inquiry. He's not Conservative, he's Labour. Harriet Harman wants one. The member for Rotherham wants one. All of the victims I have met want a full national inquiry. He keeps talking about local inquiries, yet they have not got going. And they haven't got going because local authorities don't want to investigate themselves. Local inquiries cannot force witnesses to appear. Local inquiries can't force people to give evidence under oath. So why won't he have a national inquiry?
Mr. Speaker, we've had a national inquiry. We've had recommendations. There are hundreds of recommendations that have been made in relation to this issue. It is a serious issue. I strongly believe that we should implement the recommendations that have already been made. And that is what we are doing.
I mean, there just simply hasn't been a national inquiry into the grooming gangs. It was 5 days of hearings, no whistleblowers, no victims of grooming gangs were involved. It was a much wider inquiry. Simply not true. I mean, this one's certainly going to run. I'm glad it's being brought up, even when it's not on front page of the newspapers. Let's also talk, though, about something that is very much on the front page of a lot of newspapers, and that's constantly again and again and again, and that is immigration, and particularly illegal migrants. Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, there's this system in Parliament about, we know that, you know, Leader of the Opposition gets 6 questions, the next biggest parties gets 2, so for a long time it was the SNP, and now it's back to the Lib Dems.
He said nothing of consequence today, which will shock you.
Okay, and then, now, was he wearing a wetsuit? That's all we need to know.
He wasn't.
Well, there you are then, so relief all round, everybody. party. But every now and then, smaller parties are basically guaranteed a vote, and this time it was Reform.
It was Reform, and Nigel Farage asked a question, unsurprisingly, the day before the local elections in England, where, of course, Reform are running the Conservatives and Labour very closely. I wasn't surprised that today was one of the days that the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, chose Nigel Farage. He, of course, asked to speak and spoke on people illegally crossing the Channel. We know that more than 10,000 people have done that so far this year, and in quite a lengthy question to Keir Starmer, he asked about that.
Usually gets barracked and shouted at and laughed at whenever he gets her to speak. I don't know why MPs, doesn't matter what someone's saying, I don't know why they don't get how bad that looks and sounds.
If you're watching, or you'll hear it if you're listening on the radio, there was one particular MP behind Nigel Farage who was barracking him quite a lot during this question.
Yeah, I just, again, we don't expect teachers to put up with it in classrooms. In any of your workplace, if you were at a meeting and you got up to speak and people behave like this, I don't think MPs get just how bad they look and sound when they do this. Well, let's have a watch and a listen.
Mr. Speaker, to date so far this year, 10,000 young, undocumented males have illegally crossed the English Channel into our country, a 40% increase on this time last year, many coming from cultures that are somewhat alien to ours. They are being housed at a cost of many billions of pounds a year in hotels and increasingly in private rented homes. The effect on communities is one of a sense of deep unfairness, actually bordering on resentment. In Runcorn alone, there are 750 of these young men. Just in one. Is it not time to admit that Smash the Gangs was nothing more than an election slogan and not a policy? And isn't it time to declare a national emergency and to act accordingly?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are passing a borders bill with extensive powers to smash the gangs. These are terrorist-like powers that give powers to the police to intercept where they think the suspects are committing people smuggling, which is a vile trade. We must take back control of our borders after the last government lost control. But what did he and his party do? Did they support those extra measures to actually smash the gangs? No, they went in the lobby with this lot in their new coalition to vote against them.
Again, that sort of rowdy behaviour. Look, these are really important issues. These affect people's lives and a massive impact on our taxes as well. The huge cost of this. Again, the phrase "smash the gangs." Well, they've not been smashed because this latest figure, over 10,000 people have arrived in the
exactly.
first few months
and where is the deterrent? That's the question that's being asked. And certainly, this immigration and borders bill doesn't seem to be getting the traction that Keir Starmer would like it to. Nobody really seems convinced by it.
No, indeed. But I think by any government's policies on this issue. Let's talk about net zero though, because it's fascinating. Tony Blair's interjection. It made the news yesterday.
Well, I thought Kemi Badenoch would ask a question. My phone has been lighting up with people saying, "Hold on a second, why didn't she go on this issue?"
And I think it is a big issue for a lot of people in terms of elections. Tony Blair basically being very critical of net zero policies. Now he still thinks climate change is a crisis. We need to deal with it, but it's about technology, not about the sort of policies that are being pushed currently by this government and previously by the last government, and by the way, enacted into law by Theresa May's government. In terms of that, why do you think Tony Blair interjected then? Do you think he did it with Keir Starmer's knowledge in advance? And is this an anti-Ed Miliband thing? Is it something else going on? Because Tony Blair doesn't just throw something like this in the day before a local election without thinking.
It's always planned in some way, but I think it's more Tony Blair ringing up Ed Miliband or Keir Starmer and saying, "By the way, I'm doing this tomorrow," rather than asking permission. Certainly, I think Tony Blair sees which way the wind is blowing, no pun intended, and he is
not blowing,
exactly, and sees that this is a major issue. He also knows, of course, given what happened in Spain and Portugal, the net issue is the issue of the moment.
This report would have been compiled
a long time ago, but it's coming out now, and that's not an accident. It's interesting, this was brought up a little bit later at PMQs by a Northern Irish MP called Sammy Wilson. He's been on this network, of course, and what did Keir Starmer say? He said, well, we can't weaponise the fact that Spain and Portugal lost their electricity. We need to be careful about the fact.
And yet they weaponise. If it was down to climate change, they often complain about any of these things, it's all down to climate change, then they would weaponise it. But when actually the evidence is from the Spanish grid that actually it was down to problems with solar power and the intermittent kind of solar power and the damage it does to grid security.
There's an inquiry, Julian. We've got to wait for the outcomes. We can't jump to conclusions.
Absolutely. We never jump to conclusions. Absolutely not. Peter Cole, thank you very much indeed.